Hello, everybody. My name is Mio Stevens-Gandara, Assistant Professor of Photography and current organizer for cultural events at Rio Hondo College. The Cultural Events program at Rio Hondo College presents a diverse selection of arts and entertainment free of charge for our community. Rio Hondo's Cultural Events program showcases the visual and performing arts work of students and faculty, as well as regional, national, and international artists. Our spring semester programming focuses on healing and renewal. Today, we're excited to have Samantha Morales Johnson with us. Samantha Morales Johnson is an illustrator, activist, and educator who is an active member of the Gabriel Tongva Band of Mission Indians. Samantha has a BS in marine biology from California State University, Long Beach, and has completed postgraduate studies in scientific illustration at California State University, Monterey Bay. We are excited to hear Samantha speak with us about Tongva history and cultural practices and how her experience as a Native artist informs her work. Welcome, Samantha.
Meiha, everyone. Hello and good morning. Meiha is hello in my language, and today I will be doing a Tongva history overview that was originally done by my mother, Kimberly Morales Johnson, Tribal Secretary and UC Davis PhD student. She is currently studying to get her degree in Native American Studies. And I added to this presentation to add a little bit more art and some environmental activism that I have done as a marine biologist and environmentalist. Before we get into that, I would like to introduce myself. This is me and my mom, the two creators of this presentation, and someone that I work very closely with. So both of us are basket weavers. We are both ethnobotany enthusiasts. We are both storytellers, and some fun things about us, we are both roller skaters. She started roller skating before the pandemic, and I started after. And we both know all 7 minutes of Rapper's Delight because I was raised correctly. This is a little bit about my family as well. To speak about my tribe without speaking about my family would be incomplete. And so I have to give homage not only to my present family, but also my ancestor family and the people who have come before me to create the culture and thriving community that we have today. So before I get into artwork and a little bit more about the modern topics of the Gabriel Tongva culture and community, I wanted to give you all a brief introduction of our history and what things looked like before colonization. I keep forgetting to hit the clicker. So this is my family. In the some of the most influential members that you see here, one of the most influential by far is definitely the one in the bottom right corner. That is Miss Barbara Drake. She recently became an ancestor in 2020 and was the person not only to teach me ethnobotany, but also to teach a lot of people in our community, not just ethnobotany, but other cultural importance. The rest of our tribe here is photos from the past few years, but also from as far back as the 1800s. So now with a brief introduction of our history. Just in time, a lot of people came, great. So this is our traditional lands. We are surrounded by the Chumash, Ahachiman, Serrano, Kuya, Juaneño, and Luceño tribes, and our cultures are very similar. But the Gabriel Tongva, we lived in what is today the Los Angeles County, as well as possibly a little bit of Orange County. And we also regularly inhabited the Catalina Islands, Santa Barbara, San Nicolas, and San Clemente, the Channel Islands. We had a very close relationship with the Pacific Ocean because of the way that we traveled. So before colonization, our community was very rich in trade. We had a very strong nautical traditions because of how closely we were to the Pacific Islands. And we were also a hunting and gathering community. We didn't feel a need to farm our resources because of the abundance of them. So prior to Europeans, the natural world was our grocery store and everything else. My great uncle enjoyed saying that the world was our grocery store, pharmacy, hardware store, church, school, absolutely everything. The indigenous culture was earth-based, and it possessed a profound knowledge of plants, which we still know to this day. Even though some is missing. We are really striving to recapture and preserve this knowledge that we still have of not only knowledge of our plants, but also our animals and the land of Los Angeles, which we call Tovangar. We are the Tongva, which actually means people of the earth. That is as closely as a translation as we can get to the word Tongva. We are the people of the earth, and we consider ourselves not the center of of Tovangar, but a part of Tovangar. And the other part of Tovangar was the abundance that Creator gave to us. So acorns were our staple food. We ate them as a porridge, which we called wiwish, and it is rich in protein, vitamins, and minerals, and we still eat this today. We ate it with meat, seafood, nuts, and berries. Similar to rice, it can be sweetened or made savory based on what your preferences are. But acorns actually grow across Mediterranean climates around the world. And so there is evidence of the ancient Greeks also using acorns. Korea also has a tradition of eating acorns, and you can actually buy acorn starch today at H Mart for acorn jelly, which is their traditional food. But we like to use it for our food as well, which is really convenient for us to get it from the grocery store. But we also like to use it from our Mother Earth grocery store as well. And so acorns do require a process. They are rich in tannins, which is the same thing in wine that kind of dries up your mouth and tastes bitter. And so there was a way that we had to process it, which I will get to later. We also had a lot of seafood options. The Pacific Channel is rich in minerals more than almost anywhere else on the planet because of the currents that flow from the Alaska Gyre all the way down to South America. And so we took advantage of that in the way that we were incredibly familiar with our currents and our seasons and used that to our advantage to get food. Abalone was one of our staple seafoods. It is known today as the lobster of shellfish, but back then it could be dried like jerky or smoked, as seen in the book Island of the Dolphins, if any of you read that in 4th grade. Oh, sorry. It's no problem. I was on slide 8. It has some rabbit. Yeah, the one with the rabbit on it. Okay. Sorry for the technical difficulties, everyone. So abalone, lobster of shellfish, it is still considered a prized meat today. And we used it not only to eat fresh, but also to dry or smoke like a jerky, which young boys would run the seagulls away while the abalone was drying or was cooked over the fire. And then we used the shells as jewelry, bowls, spoons, knives, thousands of things. Abalone inlay is still a common occurrence today, and abalone jewelry is still very much integrated not only into our regalia, but also just as regular accessories for us because of how beautiful the shells are. Abalone is actually, the word abalone is actually based in a Tongva word, which is abu, and it is the only Tongva word that is seen in the English dictionary today. Abalone can get as large as dinner plates, but now they are much smaller. They are one of our native species that has been severely overhunted and devastated by human impact, similar to sea turtles, where there was an abundance of them at one point and almost an annoyance, and then eventually they became so dwindled down that now it's more of a surprise when you see them in the intertidal. Fortunately, they are now sustainably farmed, but they are still in very limited supply. We also ate rabbits more often than deer, kind of like how more people are more often eat chicken than beef just because of convenience. And deer was kind of like our steak because of the challenge it took to get to it. But we were excellent with a bow and arrow and used it for hunting, primarily rabbits, and every part was used. A rabbit skin blanket was our main form of not only like as our comforter, but also as our mattress with some reeds underneath for padding. And if I had the choice between a comforter and a sustainably sewn together deer skin blanket, rabbit skin blanket, I think I would still choose the latter today. So this is a little bit of the modern way that we are reclaiming our food traditions and modernizing them. Before colonization, we wove large baskets, deshelled our acorns, and then positioned the basket in such a way in a stream that the water would naturally wash away those tannins, as seen in the bottom of this picture. This is corn processing the new Tongva way. The instructions were taken from the Chia Cafe and then painted in watercolor and pen and ink by myself. And so I wanted to show the pre-colonization way that we cleaned our acorns and then the modern way that we do now. So we use a hammer to crack open our acorns instead of a stone, and instead of a stream, we use a Vitamix to process our acorns. So we blend them dry, and then we run water over them with a cheesecloth multiple times until they're no longer bitter, or we let a little bit of water drip overnight in the sink. And then we squeeze out the water and use it immediately. It's not the easiest to process, but it has a great flavor. Something kind of like walnuts, a little bit like pine nuts, a little bit, it's very oily with like a nice olive oil almost flavor to it. And we use them for tortillas, muffins, breads, dumplings, you name it. My personal favorite is tortillas. My Uncle Abe had an excellent recipe that included a little bit of wheat flour and also a lot of butter, along with that delicious acorn oil. So it is definitely a comfort food even today. Because of the richness of Tovangar, of our land, we had endless trade opportunities. We went as far up to Alaska and as far south as the deep South Americas, and across the Channel Islands to do our trade. We used tiats, which is our word for plank canoes, which you see here in this photo on the left, and the stars to navigate up and down the coast. Tiat seamen were treated similarly to the Navy with a very, very high amount of respect. They were very exclusive and they only took the strongest men. Today, Cal State Long Beach engineering clubs build a tiat almost every year, but LGBT artist and Tongva elder, Frank Manriquez, who is an excellent artist, who I will be speaking about, expanding on later, has coordinated indigenous-centered tiat making, and I believe they are on their third or fourth complete tiat. Our main trade was baskets and soapstone bowls. These were our most valuable trade items and the ones that we most often exchange with across up and down the coast. And we got our soapstone from Catalina Island, which was a soapstone quarry for a long time and then became overused. There are buffalo in Catalina, but we never hunted them. Does anyone know why we never hunted the buffalo in Catalina? That's because the buffalo came in the 50s with Western films. So all of the buffalo on Catalina went to Catalina for a Western film that they were filming there. And for one of the scenes, they wanted to show these buffalo running on the field. So they released the buffalo and then they couldn't get them back. And so I'm so sorry. I should stop laughing. It's messing up the mic for some reason. But we could not get the buffalo back. And so today there is buffalo on Catalina, but it is not a traditional prey or hunting item for the Gabrielino Tongva. It was something that was used from plain Indian culture and then taken here to be glamorized in Hollywood, which is something that we saw often in that time. And now the Catalina buffalo are on one of the most effective forms of wildlife birth control that has ever been seen in the world. They are routinely injected with a yearly injection of birth control to prevent from overpopulation on the island, but they are not at all a part of Tongva tradition. We used Catalina Island, or we took care of Catalina Island in a way that was mostly using the soapstone bowls and then hunting rabbits and other things that were in abundance at the time. So the baskets and soapstone were both incredibly versatile and incredibly useful. That's redundant. They were incredibly versatile. Soapstone is very easy to chip and sand down. It feels very soft, almost exactly like a bar of soap, depending on the stone that you get. And because of this, it could be made into pendants, bowls, kitchen tools, decorative items, and they were especially useful because in a culture that did not have pottery, they could be heated in a way that baskets could not. Baskets, however, are to us as pottery is to the Navajo. So being a skilled basket weaver was and still is an incredibly valuable skill for my tribe. It was once seen as a women's skill, but now anyone can participate. And the need to be skilled for basket weaving not only includes the hand-eye coordination that is necessary for basket weaving and the patience for creating these coil baskets, but there's also a component of math and geometry to create the designs. Geometric designs could be used to create a story or communicate something. And there are designs from older baskets that we are still learning more about. They could have as easily been used as labels for who owned it, as well as what it was used for. Our native baskets could and often were designed specifically for tools and also for decoration. We had baskets that could fit tons of acorns for storage for later use. We had baskets that were watertight without the use of any type of tar or asphaltum to seal the basket. We had the skills to weave the basket so tightly that it held water naturally. And after colonization, we learned to mimic the style of European crochet to create ladies' handbags to sell to non-native people. Today, we still consider basket weaving a very fine art, and it is something that is considered something that you learn not only with time, but also with ancestral skill. They are also used traditionally as hats. Before colonization, the hats were used as, you could take off your hat and use it to measure or pick up something, kind of like a purse is used today. But now they are used almost exclusively as hats when it is a hat basket. So a little bit more on trade and the area that we are in because of the value in it. This is the current port of Catalina, and it generates approximately 100 billion per year in trade. And it employs more than 3,116 people, 300,000 people across Southern California. And but your colonization and the Spaniards were not the first people to use the port of Long Beach. We had the resources, land, skills, and the nautical knowledge to create a flourishing community, which is exactly what we did. This is a map of our villages, and as you can see in the slide here, our villages were clumped in a very similar place to the port of Long Beach and along other waterways inland. We did this purposefully to help us navigate as hunter-gatherers, but also for trade. Although more coastal villages had access to more seafood and marine resources, inland villages had better access to weaving materials and better acorns. The best acorn to eat is the black oak because of its size and sweetness, and it grows better in higher altitudes. Nevertheless, our villages were anchored more along the coast. And honestly, can you blame us? Los Angeles doesn't look too different today. A lot of people find more value along the coast, just as we did before. Pavungna, which is now Cal State Long Beach, is our most sacred site. It is the burial ground of thousands of ancestors, as well as our prophet, Chinichnich. And in the 1970s, Pavungna was repatriated to the Gabrielino Tongva Band of Mission Indians and ancestors that were upturned from their resting places after an attempt to build a mini mall complex in the area was returned to the grounds. Every year, CSULB hosts the Cal State Pavungna Powwow in the spring, which I highly recommend. And the Pavungna grounds itself actually are not the host of this. The campus has a large field that hosts the Pavungna Powwow. The site that remains, which is this bottom image here on the right, stays untouched throughout the year unless for ceremony, which is why we have that circle there to honor our ancestors and our prophet. A modern sacred space that we have now that has a lot of cultural significance is the Curavangna Springs, which is in Santa Monica. Curavangna means the place under the sun. And it is incredibly important today because it is our meeting grounds, and it is also one of the only untapped springs or uncapped springs in the Los Angeles area. The village was first recorded on paper by the Portola expedition and later stated in the Indian Land Claims Cause, which help us document our tribe's existence after almost being wiped out when the state of California was founded. And so this is our statement now as modern Gabrielino Tongva Mission Indians. And for the sake of the words and honoring those who wrote these, which is a council of elders much more experienced than myself, I will be reading this verbatim. The Gabrielino Tongva people are the original inhabitants of the entire Los Angeles and Orange County basins, including Santa Catalina, San Nicolas, San Clemente, and Santa Barbara Islands. The San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, continuing its base in San Gabriel, is the only state-recognized tribe in the Los Angeles and Orange County area. Our lineage dates back to thousands of years before colonization. The tribal name Gabrieleño is a Spanish derivative of San Gabriel. Our native tribal name is Tongva, derived from the native language. Tongva is translated to people of the earth. We recognize both names as homage to our ancestors who lived in our defined territories by the San Gabriel Mission. We are the first Angelinos, and we are here, Equishem, Equishem. Equishem directly means we are here in our Tongva language. So now I will get into the San Gabriel Mission, which is the start of colonization for my tribe. And it's a complicated history. I compare it similar to my father's side, which is African American. And I think of it with the same feelings as if I knew what plantation my dad's ancestors came from. It's complicated and it's a hard history. We were culturally a monotheistic and personable tribe because we were traders after all. And so when the colonizers came to California, we went trustingly and willingly because we had traded with them before and had some sort of a relationship. And then once the mission was built, many of us were enslaved and we lost our identity as Tongva and instead became Gabrieleños because of the San Gabriel Mission. We belonged to the mission as far as they were concerned. Treatment progressively got worse. The mission center it started with the mission being the center, with Tongva villages surrounding the mission, and our traditional language and regalia was still worn. However, when the mission was finished, we were effectively enslaved and regalia turned into Western clothing. Depending on the padre, we had different different types of treatment. We started with wearing Western clothing, and then that turned into sackcloths that constantly gave rashes. There is evidence of very small shackles that may not have been used on adults. There is evidence of very young children being invited into padres' rooms. And as things got worse, the spread of disease from not only unfamiliar viruses and bacteria, but also from stress, lowered our population significantly. One of the people to revolt from this enslavement was Toypurina, who led an almost successful revolt. Today, she is seen as one of our matriarchs and heroes because of her way to not only communicate with our tribe, but also with other captured communities to lead this revolt. The other iconic Tongva woman who is known by many, even though not a lot of people know that she is Tongva or is who she is Swana Maria, the lone woman of San Nicolas Island. She was almost captured by Spanish colonizers and taken to a mission, but instead lived relatively peacefully by herself for 18 years on San Nicolas Island before being captured and taken to the wrong mission. When she got to that mission, no one understood what she was saying because she was speaking Tongva, which was not a language that anyone was familiar with at that mission. And they found out her origin not long before she died. The missions used fertile California soil in agriculture and cattle farming, and they used the Tongva as slave labor. So Swana Maria, although she was missing community, was not missing a lot of hardship. Today, the San Gabriel Mission is doing what they can to help our tribe move on from the extreme trauma that the church caused. This is partially to the new Pope, but it has been happening for decades now. They keep our records and they give us open record access. They give us access to ancestral burial sites without question. They have access to hold ceremony and celebratory events on the mission grounds. And many tribal elders today continue to identify as Catholic or Christian. And so, although there is a very complicated history, they are still a part of our history, and we do choose to still work with them because of the value that we hold from all of the information that they're able to keep with for us in a very safe and protected place. And their willingness to not only include us, but also acknowledge us in their history and the pain that they brought has, we've appreciated that very much. And so the missions, although bad, were far from the worst that happened to our tribe in California history. So the missions turned into presidios for more military force to enslave the natives. And then around the time of the Mexican War, we saw that ranchos were created during the uncertainty of the territory. And the indigenous people of the Los Angeles area and other mission areas were used as lowly paid laborers, as we see from the pipeline of enslavement to low paid laboring, and then eventually to freedom. And then the concessions of the land after the ranchos were given from 1785 to 1846 to Mexican war veterans across the ranchos and surrounding land. These were considered the land grabs because at any point, a Mexican war vet could say that this was their territory, this was their land, and take it without any question. It was, this was also the time of Lincoln's Morale Act, which worked to seed money from tribes to higher education. And this is how a lot of California institutions got its land. This may also possibly be the reason why Cal State Long Beach is on Pavunga today, along with many other areas that are on Tongva Village sites. This was a direct violation of treaties, which we see throughout the Americas. California became a state in 1850, and things got much worse. As I said before, we knew the value of this land. The Los Angeles area is one of the largest metropolises in the country for a reason. The weather is always nice, the fruit is always delicious, and we have 24/7 perfect beach access. And we were not the only ones to know this. Colonizers also knew this, and they didn't feel like sharing. So in 1852, Hugo Reed wrote his book, which is still crucial to our culture because he was able to record a lot of cultural items and ancestral knowledge from talking to elders. But it was also when the California governor issued its bounties. In 1852, Governor Bigler of California issued bounties for Native Americans, and it almost successfully wiped us out. The state of California paid $17.50 for the murder of every Native American, which is $630 today. And so we decided to go into hiding. Because we already knew Spanish from the missions, we integrated into the Latin community for safety. And to this day, we still are a part of the Latin community in Los Angeles. Most of our events still include a taco man because can you blame us? But in 1903 to 1940, we were able to leave hiding and begin a cultural reclamation. In 1903, C. Hart Merriam and A.L. Kroeber began their study of the Gabrielino, and they were followed by Constance Dubois and J.P. Harrington. Harrington recorded songs and culture, and Roberts published a form in primitive music which focuses on Gabrielino music and songs. In the 1940s, Tongva chiefdom continues from Chief Salvador to Fred Morales, also known as Fred Sparky Morales, and it maintained the center of surviving Tongva culture. And so this was when we were just starting to not only get access to the literature that was recorded before our active genocide from the state of California, but it was also time to reclaim things that we had learned from elders. And then in the 90s, things really started to have a cultural resurgence. This was mostly thanks to Chief Anthony Morales and his son Andy Morales. On February 6, 1995, Sparky Morales died, and his son Anthony assumed the chiefdom. And so this was the same year that the Tongva Nation Dancers were founded. And then that following September, the Gabrielino Tongva constructed a display section of the village of Choquishna for Heritage Park in the city of Santa Fe Springs. November 14th, the Gabrielino joined with the city of San Gabriel in the expansion of Smith Park to honor the village site of Sabina. The opening of Hadhamukna Interpretive Center at Red Box in the San Gabriel Mountains happened. The continuation with the discussions of Hadhamukna. And most importantly, in my opinion, because this is where I grew up to receive my culture, the opening of the Emetmo Taharat Kahish Tongva Youth Center in El Monte. This is where we regularly went for not only learning dances and songs, but also for cultural events, holidays, and community building. And we got to do a lot of really cool things. It was the beginning of our acknowledgement. So now we have the Moompatom celebration at the Aquarium of the Pacific every fall. The Tongva dancers regularly performed at museum openings and other events before the pandemic. We began to connect again with more tribes across the country. And my uncle even met Johnny Depp before he was Tonto in The Lone Ranger, even though my uncle tends to mispronounce it to Tonto, which I'm not sure if he's mispronouncing on purpose or not. So we are here now, Equishem, but now we are acknowledged so much more. And although we've always been a part of the framework of Los Angeles, we have never been acknowledged more than we have today. This is, in my opinion, mostly due to the internet, but also an increasing demand for land acknowledgements and less Eurocentric education. This could not have been done without outside help from the Indigenous community. And so for those who actively seek out our opinion and presence, I want to say I genuinely appreciate your allyship, because although we can raise our voice as loud as we can, there aren't many of us because of our almost elimination that happened so many years ago. So for those of you who are sitting here today or even on Zoom, I appreciate you coming here to learn more about whose land you are on. This has caused a lot of progress. It's caused a lot of politicians to sweat. Thank you so much for that. In July 2019, Governor Newsom apologized to Native Americans for the atrocities that happened. In October of 2021, Mayor Eric Garcetti apologized to our tribe in particular for the atrocities that happened in Los Angeles County. And it has brought us to the present tense. Today we have craft revitalization, language revitalization, cultural integration, environmental activism, food sovereignty, and hopefully very soon land back. Part of this is due to art, because art is awareness, in my personal opinion as an artist. We have a lot of media that is not only acknowledging our existence, but also celebrating our culture and existence. And art is by far one of the greatest things that has helped influence our awareness in the Los Angeles community. So I'm going to share a little bit about some very specific Tongva artists or Tongva affiliated artists in the community. I saved the best for first because I wanted to honor the amazing work of my elders and older relations. And so I'm going from oldest to youngest for artists. The first person I would like to speak about is Frank Manriquez. They are a Tongva Ahachiman artist, writer, and tribal activist. Their paintings have been featured in galleries and museums nationally and internationally. Frank is also the co-founder of Advocates for Indigenous California Language Survival and serves on the board of the Cultural Conservancy. They are openly queer and autistic and an all-around fantastic human being who has stood up for us in multiple ways and has helped us revitalize our language. The next person I want to speak about is Abe Sanchez. Abe Sanchez, who wove this beautiful basket hat here on the left, identifies as Latino, but he is an extremely influential Tongva basket weaver. Abe has been integrated into our community by being an incredibly loving person who is eager to learn, and he is actively helping us continue our basket weaving traditions. Abe uses almost entirely traditional Tongva dyeing, processing, and weaving practices, and has created baskets, hats, vases, and many other materials for galleries across the coast. The other two artists I want to acknowledge who are considered more classically trained, but are definitely incredibly culturally relevant, is Wesheo Alvitre and Mercedes Dorame. Wesheo Alvitre is Tongva and Scottish, and she is a comic book artist and illustrator. She was born in the Santa Monica Mountains in the property of Sativiwa, a cultural center started by her father, Art Alvitre. And she grew up close to the land and raised with traditional knowledge that inspires the work she does today. She has worked with many prestigious entertainment institutions, such as Disney, Marvel, and the Smithsonian. But today, Alvitre has made a conscious choice to work primarily with Native-owned publications and educational avenues to further support a self-funded narrative on past, present, and future Native issues. It is through this voice and through her artwork that she feels she is able to communicate her unique viewpoint and continue a strong dialogue on issues that are more important to her as a Native woman. As a comic artist, in my opinion, some of her best work is her strong female iconography and traditional Tongva patterns and cultural items well integrated into that artwork. Mercedes Dorame, born in Los Angeles, California, received her master's in fine arts from San Francisco Art Institute and her undergraduate degree from UCLA. Mercedes calls on her Tongva ancestry to engage the problematics of invisibility and ideas of cultural construction. She is very much focused on bringing our culture and our artwork to the present tense, which is just the truth of it, but a lot of institutions still acknowledge us in the past tense. She is currently visiting facility at Cal Arts and was recently honored by UCLA as part of the Centennial Initiative, UCLA's Our Stories, Our Impact. And she was part of the Hammer Museum 2018 Made in LA exhibition. She has shown her work internationally, and her writing has been featured in news from Native California and 580 Split. And her artwork has been highlighted by PBS NewsHour, the New York Times, Art in America, Hyperallergenic, Los Angeles Times, San Francisco Chronicle, among others. These two have two very different mediums, but both are just as powerful. Wishayot's ability to represent us in strong images and cultural relevancy is invaluable with the industry that she has worked with. And Mercedes has brought back some of our cultural items, recreating our cogstones, which are unique to the Tongva tribe, into what she calls star stones, and has created alternate gallery pieces that have stunned many viewers. Speaking for the youngest of us, we have River and myself. River is an artist from Los Angeles also who works, who draws up from traditional indigenous aesthetics, as well as Southern California indigenous maritime culture, skateboarding, graffiti, Mexican culture, and lowriding culture. This is my favorite painting of Rivers because I love the satire of it. But he has many other protest pieces and collages that are just as impactful. He is an incredibly active member of the Los Angeles area's mural community, as well as the indigenous art community of Los Angeles. I myself am an artist, animator, and ethnobotanist. Currently, I specialize in scientific animation and cultural art. As a science illustrator, I want to highlight the beauty of our plant and animal relatives as much as possible. So I use my work to teach students as well as adults. Some of my art is more activism than science, as the times we are in demands it to be. And I created this painting here on the right during my first year at CSUMB's Science Illustration Program. This is the regalia my mom made for me when I was 7. And then later on, it was worn by my young cousin Ellie in 2018 on Indigenous Peoples Day when she was photographed for the LA Times. I spent almost 40 hours on the painting, more than half of it in that time being those insane tassels. But I titled it Not Your Costume, both as a nod towards the quippy and strong spirit of the women in my family and tribe, but also as anyone who tells me to get over Native American costumes. This painting in particular is currently being reviewed for my second ever exhibit at the Maloof Museum in Alta Loma. But my proudest accomplishment, which is a part of this, is how we can tell our own stories now. Before, all of our stories were centered or were authored by non-Indigenous people. And now we're able to come forward and publish our own things. And so this is my own personal animation that I created over the course of last year. And it is The Legend of the Rainbow Bridge as narrated by my grandfather.
The legend you are about to hear has been told by many elders from many tribes. This is how it was told to me, a young member of the Gabriel Tongva band of Mission Indians.
The Earth People, the Tongva, lived peacefully across the area of Southern California that is now LA County, but they also lived on Catalina Island. The Tongva lived happily in their villages, but every day they would look across the channel and see the smoke from the cooking fires and wonder about their brothers and sisters. When they could no longer stand looking out at the fires, they cried out to the Creator. Creator, Creator, they cried. Let us meet our brothers and sisters. Creator heard the cries and made a rainbow bridge for them to cross from the village on Catalina called Pimu to the mainland. The people celebrated and climbed up the rainbow bridge. The bridge was higher than any hill on Catalina. Some of the people were so overwhelmed by the height that they grew dizzy. Some fainted and began to fall. As they fell, all the Tongva cried out, "Creator, Creator, save our brothers and sisters." Creator heard them once more, and as they fell from the great height of the Rainbow Bridge, Creator turned them into something new. Instead of crashing into the sea, they glided into the water. The Tongva people celebrated as they saw the safety of their brothers and sisters both on land and in the sea. This is why the Torovim, the dolphins, are so much like us, because they are the earth people who fell off the Rainbow Bridge long ago.
Okay. So now that we've talked a little bit about art, I wanted to talk about environmental activism. Because plants are considered our relatives and ancestors, it would be wrong of me not to include the plant people that are under the most distress. And that would be Soshat, which is our white sage. Soshat is white sage in Tongva language. So what we're seeing right now is an incredibly high amount of white sage poaching. And it has been devastating not only to our community, but also our environment. How many people are familiar with smudge sticks by raise of hand? You've all seen a sage smudge stick at your local farmer's market, Whole Foods, some type of smudge stick. Yeah, so unfortunately, not a lot of people know where these smudge sticks come from, and that is done on purpose. So there is a process for getting this white sage. When grown in a backyard, white sage, especially in Southern California, with a little bit of water and love, will absolutely flourish. But not a lot of farms actively grow white sage. A lot of the white sage that you see in bundles comes from wholesalers, and they will not admit where they get it from. And the reason why they will never specify where they get it from is because what they do is they exploit migrant workers who are desperate for work. White sage is very easy to identify in the wild, so they tell them how to identify it. They tell them that they will get into a lot of trouble if they are caught, so don't. They give them these large army-sized duffel bags that can fit about 100 pounds of white sage each, and they tell them to go and gather right around this time, actually, this time in spring. And so the migrant workers unknowingly damage the sensitive ecosystem. Because they are told to get as much as they can, and they are paid up to $30 per pound, they will take everything from the plant except for the root. This is especially devastating because of climate change and drought, which has impacted Southern California very significantly, as I'm sure you all are very familiar with all of the fires that we see regularly. And so the white sage does not have time always to recover before that drought and fire season after being ripped up like that. If the migrant worker is caught, they are fined over $30,000 and have a possibility of jail time. But the wholesalers can get away from it without any issues. And so more often than not, wholesalers will use a whole distribution chain of migrant workers who are not aware of the environmental impact that they're causing. Not only that, but because of the white sage being poached and because of the awareness that has happened for park rangers who, like the Etowanda Preserve, which has a lot of white sage, because they know of the extent of the poaching that happens, which can be, I think the largest number I've heard is, what was it? I think it was like 1,000 pounds in one find. This past summer, we experienced seeing 300 pounds of white sage, and that was absolutely overwhelming. But because of the extent of the white sage poaching that is happening, California natives are prohibited from gathering and building relationships with their plant relatives in the wild. So although Etowanda Preserve is a natural gathering ground for not only my tribe, but other surrounding tribes, we are no longer allowed to gather in any public space because of this large amount of white sage poaching. So there are ways that you can definitely help to resist this issue. The first one is grow your own sage plant if you have the space. They grow best outside, so if you don't have that outdoor space, it's okay. You can get white sage from most botanical institutions and some growers, but it will flourish if you plant it in California. The second thing and the most important thing is do not buy white sage bundles from a vendor if they cannot specifically tell you where they got it from. Most white sage sellers, they will either say, I don't know where this came from, or they will say something like, oh, I got it from my backyard, or I got it from this farm specifically. There are only, I believe, 3 farms that actually grow and farm their own white sage and maintain their own white sage relationship. Otherwise, a lot of people grow it in their backyards because of how large it can get in a well taken care of environment. And so there are small businesses that sell white sage, that's okay. But otherwise, please do not buy white sage from vendors that cannot tell you where they get it from. Vote. We are trying our best to get legislation passed to not only make sure that the wholesalers are punished, but also to make sure that the migrant workers don't face this harsh of a judgment, because this is not their fault. We do not think it is their fault. We know that the wholesalers are the ones who are misinforming them, and they are also the ones that are directly benefiting from this poaching. So we're trying to get measures moved to make sure that they are the ones that are held accountable for their actions. Boycott stores that exploit white sage and have actively worked against Indigenous people. The 3 biggest ones that I can speak on are Spencer's, Five Below, and Juniper Ridge. Spencer's has been selling white sage for years, along with all of their very interesting paraphernalia. Five Below has these little kits, which I personally find the most insulting because they're these little $5 plastic kits with a little sage, and a little abalone shell, a little piece of Palo Santo, which is also poached, and a hawk feather. All of these things are not only something that should not be put in a plastic bag, but this is also direct cultural appropriation. If you would not wear a Native American costume, do not buy a little meditation kit or whatever they're called at Five Below with the abalone shell and the white sage. You can smudge white sage, but please do not use an abalone shell. And please make sure that you're using some, preferably that you've gathered it from yourself from a backyard or space of a flourishing white sage plant. Juniper Ridge, although they do not sell abalone shells, they have blocked every Indigenous person who has spoken out about white sage poaching, including many from our Tongva community. And they are actively in denial of what they're doing. The other 2 things that you can do is please spread the word. One of my favorite things to do is for small businesses at farmers market who sell white sage, I don't want to put them on blast or cancel them or anything like that. Instead, the best thing to do is ask where the white sage came from. And if they cannot specify the place that it's from, then say, oh, that's really sad. I heard that white sage is being poached really terribly and it's really bad for the environment and the Native community. And just leave it there. If they continue to sell it, that is their decision. But to make sure that we are not buying or giving in to this exploitation of Sosat is incredibly important. The last thing you can do is, if you want to stay up to date on these things, there is an Instagram page that is directed by the Tongva community. It's called Protect White Sage, and we try to keep it as up to date as possible. We are being, like I said, we are being acknowledged, and we are thriving more than we ever had, but land is currently being desecrated, and then there are a lot of other current issues that we are still facing today. These are some of the sacred sites that have ancestral burial grounds. The Bolsa Chica wetlands, Pavongna Cal State Long Beach, Santa Ana. These are all places with evidence of not only village sites, but also burial grounds that we are trying to protect. If you see any of these places come up in the news, please be aware of them. We are continuing with our Protect White Sage initiative, and then also trying to get a voluntary land tax, because one of the most unfortunate things for our community is that we do have community members that want to be involved but cannot live in the Los Angeles area because of how high the cost of living is, which I'm sure all of you are painfully aware of, because rent hurts my wallet constantly. So getting a land tax so that way we can help our community members who otherwise would not be able to live here is very important. The other thing is land acknowledgements. We are being acknowledged more than ever, but to continue that acknowledgement is crucial, because the acknowledgement leads to what happens after land acknowledgement, which is land back, as well as community justice and remediation for the things that we have been facing for centuries since colonization. Part of your education and decolonization is reading harsh books. Honestly, if you are a part of the Indigenous community, this is more suggested reading than anything, because we already face a lot of hardship, and sometimes reading these things doesn't help. It only makes things feel much worse than they already are. But for those of you who do not identify as Indigenous or a part of the Indigenous community, I recommend these 3 books. These are books that my mother is currently reading for her PhD in Native American Studies. Most importantly is The Other Slavery. This is the one that she has commented most on for not only its relevancy and importance, but also what it shows for the entire Indigenous community. But education and decolonization can also be fun. So although these are not mandatory things that you need to watch and read, I do highly suggest them, because they show relevancy in a way that is not just painful, sad stories. And so one of these, my personal favorite, is City of Ghosts. It is a animated documentary series, I guess is the best way to put it, on Netflix. It's made for children, but is endlessly useful to any audience. I believe episode 8 is the episode that focuses on our land, which is, I believe it's called Tovangar, the episode, and it directly interviews tribal elders, and is one of the most amazing pieces of cultural work that I've seen in these past few years. Island of the Blue Dolphins, as I said before, acknowledges the lone island of San Nicolas, Swana Maria. And then on YouTube, if you look up the Los Angeles River, you should be able to find a video of my mother and my cousin Ellie, who are my regalia. They do a little demonstration of how to make a tool reed doll and talk about the plants and the LA River. And it is an amazing piece of just a cultural documentation that you're not really able to get many other places. These are the other 3 things on this slide are things that I just find culturally relevant and wonderful. The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, I have been obsessed with since I was a kid, and I wasn't allowed to read it, and I snuck reading it. I have read it multiple times, and I think it is a great way to learn a little bit more about natives that currently still live on reservation lands. Reservation Dogs is an amazing show, not only for cultural relevancy, but also it's just funny and fantastic. And Smoke Signals as well is a great movie to watch if you want to learn a little bit more about Native culture and humor. And then this is all of our contact information. One of the best websites to get our information is gabrielino-nss.us. This is the website that we currently use to update our old website. Gabrielino.org is currently facing a lot of spam issues, unfortunately. So if you go to gabrielino.org, I believe it's selling Viagra now. It is something that I've been dealing with that has been terrible. But gabrielino-nsn.us is where you can get a lot of our history, more modern and more and older as well. And photo galleries, some of our legends are on there as well, and all of our contact information is there. And I would like to open the floor to questions. Awish Kuneha, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Samantha. Yeah, we have time for a couple of quick questions. Does anybody in the audience have a question they'd like to ask Samantha? They're shy. I have a question. So it's funny. I think I went to Descanso Gardens, and I think I saw that video.
Yes, you
And
definitely did.
I loved it. We watched the whole thing, and my nephews were there. So I think, so this is a great question because I didn't realize that was your family. But I was looking at the native plants they had there, and they had the scientific name, and then they had the indigenous names, but only for some. And a lot of the indigenous names were missing. Can you speak to that? Why are those missing, or is that correct even? I'm just curious.
So we consider our language dormant right now, or waking up from being dormant. And so with that, there are a lot of meetings that are even currently going on about the relevancy of certain words. The example that I use most often is someone found a word for sunflower, and they weren't sure if it was for sunflowers in general or that specific type of sunflower. And so because of the issues that we're getting from our language still waking up and of finding these original words, some are still missing just because we're not sure which is correct. And some of them we might just be missing the words in general because we have so few recordings of our native words. And so I've seen quite a few different Tongva language dictionaries. All of them are kind of missing a couple words here and there. It is part of, unfortunately, what I consider to be an almost effective genocide because of how well our language was once eliminated, and we are still recovering from that. But we are recovering, which is the good news.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that stuff get updated.
Yeah, me too.
As you learn more, and it's learning about the stories of people whose languages are suppressed. I keep running into more and more information from people like my family's from Okinawa, and I'm learning certain things were banned. So I think your story is talking about Tongva folks, but there's so many other ways in which students and their cultural backgrounds can really relate to the way that colonial mindset has kind of wiped things out, and we can recover from that.
Yeah, colonization and white supremacy has done a number on a lot of people.
Yeah, no kidding. Anybody have a question before we close out? No? Oh, you have one question.
What kind of material were the baskets made out of?
So multiple materials. We use juncus and deergrass specifically, but there were a lot of materials that could have been used. Willow branches are also one that's been used often, but yucca is a very important plant for us, not just for weaving materials, but also for all of the other things that plant provides. But juncus and deergrass are probably the two most specific ones. Pine needles we also used. Basket weaving was considered an art form in a way that if you were able to work with the materials, then you have the potential to make something beautiful. And so there are multiple different baskets and basket styles. There are even basket styles that are different variations from different tribes, even though we were all a very similar basket tradition. So a Kauai basket looks different from a Tongva basket, even though they have the same materials because of the way that the materials are used or processed. And so a lot of California native plants have some sort of use, and juncus and deergrass are definitely our valuable basket weaving materials.
Hello. Your P.O. box address has no zip code. What would that be? San Gabriel, California.
Oh, the P.O. box? I actually think that the P.O. box is going to change soon, which we'll update on our website. But most recently, we've been trying to figure out where best to put the new P.O. box. We unfortunately lost our youth center, the one that I grew up in, because of the high rent that happened. Or I don't know if it was rent. It was something that made it more difficult to share space there. So now we meet mostly in Cotavagna, among other places. But we hope to have an updated P.O. box within probably the end of the year.
Hi, my name is Diana Melvice, and I am a Dramatists Guild member. And many years ago, I wrote a play. It's called A Rumor Explodes in Cheesenville. It's a silly title, but I always had the idea of having indigenous people in it from the LA County area. I just didn't know anything about that, and I always wanted to meet someone like you and ask questions about how to integrate the essence without being too specific because of one particular character. And I didn't want to share that she was indigenous because I was afraid of the impact of saying too much or saying it wrong. Her wardrobe is very specific, and I was just concerned over stepping over and doing it wrong, you know what I mean? So I never described her name or her tribe because I wanted to wait. But I'm really shocked at what your description of poaching, because that was part of the play. I thought, wow, what? So I didn't know about the white sage situation, but I always had a hint that something was being poached. I just didn't know how to say that. And I also included a lot of the California seeds, how they should be coming back. And well, that's part of the play. There's a lot of other stuff in it, but I always wanted to know, and I didn't know how. I didn't trust books, you know what I mean? Because I didn't know which books to read. So I'm glad I'm here, and I will learn more.
Yeah, so white sage is definitely one of our most poached items, one of our most, not items, relatives, one of our most poached relatives. Abalone was once poached a lot more, but now people get fined a lot of money for poaching abalone, thankfully, and that is a little bit more direct because usually you have to be a diver, and it's hard to, find people who have diving experience without knowing some kind of environmental impact. So they usually know what they're doing, which is why they are fined so severely or put in prison, I believe, for like 20 years. It's a very extensive punishment, which I am kind of grateful for. But white sage is definitely the biggest impact. And then if you wanted to make her regalia most reflective of us, at least today, is we still use a lot of shells to accessorize, especially abalone. And so we decorate ourselves with abalone shell, cowrie shell, scallop shell. Those were, although we have beadwork that's kind of intertribal at this point culturally, shells and leather are our most traditional regalia items.
Great. Thank you so much, Samantha, for your time. We really appreciate it. Before we sign off, I have one announcement. This is our last event for this semester. We have an event called Healing and Renewal Through Art, Self-Help Graphic Screen Printing Workshop. And that's not a talk, that's actually a workshop that you guys can drop in at any time between noon and 1 o'clock on Thursday, March 24th in the lower quad. You can run up, you can make a silk screen print and learn a little bit about it. It won't take long and you'll really enjoy the process. So thank you all for coming. Thank you so much, Samantha Johnson. We really appreciate it.